We're four friends with hot takes on food media.
And we're here to review and recap all kinds of food shows in bite-sized seasons.
Plus, virtual potlucks, cooking adventures, and food memes.
Welcome to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
Hi, I'm Amanda.
Hey, it's Justine.
Hey, it's LJ.
And it's me, Meg.
Yay!
It's me, yeah, Meg.
Tis I.
Tis I. Welcome to Season 2 of Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes. As we announced in our last episode, each season we are now going to be exploring a different cooking show or YouTube channel, and we're all going to go on a lovely journey together exploring what's out there in food media. This season, we are talking about Netflix's 2018 series, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, based off of Samin Nosrat's James Beard Award-winning book of the same name. In this series, chef and food writer Samin Nosrat travels around the world to demystify and explore the central principles of what makes food delicious. But first, we're going to kick things off by talking about what we've been up to culinary-wise. How about you, LJ?
LJ has been making, it's quite boring because it's something I've made before. Also, it's kind of BA related, which I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to kick off the show with that. But basically, this week I made a massive lasagna because I knew I needed something. I was going away in the middle of the week because my sister got married. So I went to go and see that at a socially distanced wedding, which was very strange, but very nice all the same. And so I knew I wouldn't want to feel like cooking when I got back. So I just wanted to make something that I could freeze and just put in the oven, portion it out and put it in the oven when I needed it. So basically I made this huge lasagna before I went. And yeah, it's based off of the BA best lasagna recipe, which I know, but in my defense, I did not click. I actually kind of did it from memory, so because I made it at Christmas, and it wasn't that difficult to remember for me. So that's okay, right? That's not gonna.
So now it's LJ's best lasagna recipe.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I think I can live with that. So yeah, it was very nice, very delicious, and lasted all week. So that's. It takes a long time though. It's 5-6 hours, so don't remember to start it at 5 expecting to have dinner ready at 7 because it won't work. You have to think about it ahead of time. But we had a holiday weekend last weekend over here, so I did it on the Monday.
I'm just impressed you knew how to do that without having to look at a recipe.
Okay, obviously everyone's different, and if you don't cook a lot, I guess it would feel more difficult. But when you break it down, it's a ragu sauce, which, my bolognese sauce I make all the time. It's not that different from that. And it's a cheese sauce, which is just a bechamel roux, which is flour, butter, and some milk and some cheese. So it's not that hard. And then you just put it all together and shove it in the oven. The key, I think, is just cooking it kind of low and slow, the meat sauce, because you don't want to cook that too quick because then you don't get all the flavor in it. So that's the thing that takes the time. So it's rather than thinking, oh my god, lasagna, that's huge. When you break it down, it's actually just three components, I suppose.
You describing the supposed simplicity just reminds me of that how to draw an owl meme where you draw 2 circles and then you draw the rest of the owl.
That's LJ in a nutshell.
I swear, it's not hard. If you've made, I've been making pasta sauces my whole life. So a meat ragu sauce and a cheese sauce is nothing. So it's just, to me, I'm that's not difficult. It's just putting it all together and the fact that it takes a while. So yeah, that was me. How about you guys?
Last weekend I made some chicken salad that's just based on a recipe my grandma used to make. And I didn't have to look at it because I've made it a bunch. And it's a lot simpler than lasagna. But it's a big hit in my house. Everybody likes my chicken salad. So that goes over well. And then, that's really all I've done recently. I started a new job. So I get home and I'm very tired and I often fall asleep before anybody else makes dinner. So I just eat a couple things real fast and fall asleep.
I know that feeling. I remember that from the first trimester. Russ did a lot of cooking then.
So for the last 2 weeks, my husband and I have been eating vegetarian. So that's been an adventure. For some reason, my husband is convinced that he'll get a better night's sleep with eating less meat. So we're giving it a go.
Yeah.
And it's been going really well. It hasn't been too much of an adjustment, to be honest. Cooking pasta, cooking a lot of grains and rice and lentils and that type of thing. It's been pretty good. So we'll see how long we can keep it up. We're not calling ourselves vegetarian because as soon as I make a commitment like that, I feel really bad if I break it. So it's more like we're trying to eat less meat, which has been going well so far. I've also been really happy because I've discovered this essentially local drive-through farmers market, I guess I would call it. You just order a box of produce online, drive up, and then they plop it in your trunk. So there's no contact. It's really safe to be doing during these COVID times. But it's great because I missed going to the farmers market. It was something I didn't feel comfortable doing, but now I can get a huge box of fresh produce and do it safely and comfortably. So lots of fruits and veggies in my life recently.
Nice.
Has your husband's sleep gotten better?
Not yet. Crossing our fingers for hopefully that to change soon.
I think that's good. I've been trying to eat less than she says, having said that she spent all week eating lasagna. I have been trying to eat less meat recently, but I have to kind of do it by stealth because Russ is a really big meat eater. Like he's one of those people that if you serve someone a dinner without meat, he'll be like, well, where's the rest of it? Even though it's a perfectly normal like portion of food. So yeah, I've just been, when we've been doing like our meal planning for like the following week, I've just been like, what about this vegetarian recipe? What about that? So a few of them have kind of slipped in there. I don't know whether he's noticed or not, but I've been liking like not having, for one, it's cheaper, and second, it just feels like better for the planet, I suppose.
Yeah, I feel better. I feel good about it.
Yeah.
What about you, Justine?
Yeah, I also eat vegetables.
I don't think you've ever mentioned that before.
I don't know. What? Actually, I have been cutting out processed sort of foods lately and have been on a kick of some like raw and fresh sort of stuff. But yeah, like I've been eating a lot of quinoa. I've been roasting a lot of vegetables like roasted sweet potatoes, roasted cauliflower. I like it that you just like chop it up, put it in the oven, walk away, and then I come back, I just make a bowl with like a grain, vegetable, and I normally have like a tahini sauce or a pesto.
Nice.
Like I've really just sort of like simplified things.
Yeah. That sounds really nice.
Yeah,
Very
I think
nice.
I saw a picture of your pesto.
Yeah. I made a delicious basil and pumpkin pesto. So
Pumpkin?
yummy. I want to put it on everything.
It's the pumpkin seeds. Yeah, I was going to say, not actual pumpkin, but the seeds, yeah.
Sorry.
Justine making pesto?
What?
What?
I know. Tradition continues. I will make pesto out of anything. You got a seed, you got a green, you got a pesto. Well, moving on to the meat of our episode today.
No, the vegetable of our episode today, Justine. We've just established
we're
we're
all
not
cutting
eating meat anymore.
Today we are covering episode 1, Fat. And the episode description on Netflix is, in northern Italy, Samin savors the magical properties of olive oil, pork fat, and cheese as she visits farms and helps prepare local specialties. Let's discuss.
Why, first of all, was this episode, the first episode, not salt? Discuss.
Yeah. Discuss.
It's already a difficult title to remember the proper order of, and then they switch around fat and salt just to confuse us further.
We keep slipping into Jimmy
I feel
Eat
like
World.
It's one of those
Sweat.
like SEO things. Somebody is like, we put fat first, they'll click on it.
Maybe. That does seem like the sort of thing Netflix would do. But it's just my OCD brain is like, it should be salt.
Yeah. Even while I was watching it and enjoying it, I was like, but this should be the second episode.
Yeah. But we can get past that, right? I think the fact that the program's just so beautiful to watch, I was just like, I forgave it that in like the first second. I was like, okay, I can forgive that it's not technically the first episode, correct? But yeah, I really enjoyed watching this. It was just so nice to watch such a lovingly shot show, right? Like, she's really passionate. It's clear that the people that are, you know, making the show are really passionate about showcasing everything that she's talking about and the places that she's going and the people that she's talking to and the ingredients she's using. Like, I just thought it was gorgeous all the way through. And I watched it before dinner, which I can't decide was a good or terrible idea. Because by the end of it, I was like,
I think that's a good idea because it made me very hungry and I watched it late at night. So food was very far off and it made me sad.
Aww.
But I agree. This is beautiful, visually gorgeous. The B-roll was just wonderful. I think that this was the perfect time to watch this show because I really felt transported, which is something I'm definitely looking for in these times when we can't really go anywhere. So it really felt like this beautiful, loving love letter essentially to Italy and a travelogue in a lot of ways, which is something I always enjoy. And like you said, Samin is obviously very passionate. The people she speaks with are very passionate. And it's just very friendly and convivial. And it's almost like you're there among them. It's like you, the audience, has been invited into their homes as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know like Samin sort of emphasize like a non-cooking cooking show, and it's kind of like how her cookbook is, which the show is based off the book.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did you guys feel about that format?
There were a few times that I was like, oh, wait, I wish I knew how long that went in the oven or something, just because, like, I would like to maybe make that or something. And I know, like, our plan is also to do some sort of potluck based on this later on, so trying to get ideas. But I don't know, in general, it didn't bother me as much because, like Meg said, it was like the travelogue, and for me, Italy is one of my favorite places I've been in the world, and so it really made me like miss the food and the people and the place and like wanting to go there, even though it wasn't like, and here is the exact recipe and how long you put it in the oven and the exact amount or whatever. It felt like we were getting, one of the things that we have liked is personality in general, and I feel like we were getting the personalities of each of the cooks or like butcher or like whoever she was meeting with about the type of food.
I love Italy too. I think I've never been to a country where everyone, like literally everyone you meet, cares so much about food. Like they wouldn't just put any old crap in their mouths. Like I feel like they're like, even from like the tiniest cafes in the like middle of nowhere countryside are just like the freshest ingredients, the best stuff. Do you know what I mean? Before they'll even think about putting it together. And I think that's what's so amazing about Italian food. And I think Samin says it in the show at one point in this episode that you know, everything about Italian cooking is actually really, really simple, but that only works if you care about the provenance of what you're cooking with, because you can't just cook with like shitty tomatoes and expect it to taste the same as what they do in Italy, because you won't. You know, that love and respect for the raw ingredients isn't there. So you can taste it and you can taste the difference. And I would say that's completely true based on my experience of going there and eating there. You know, from the nicest restaurants to like service stations at the side of the road, every single thing they produce is just delicious. They wouldn't, you know what to do with like a shitty pre-packaged sandwich. They'd be like, no, I have this fresh panini that we've made. Do you know what I mean? It's amazing.
Let's talk about that and like dive into like the olive oil section first. Now, definitely something that I've learned this year is to love and use olive oil, because like I find it to be like so expensive. Like previously in my life, I would just only use it like when it was specifically noted in recipes, you know, of like I would save it forever. And I feel like I learned through us talking, and definitely it's reiterated in this episode, that like olive oil is alive and it goes
Fresh.
rancid, and just use it and get good quality. Do you guys want to talk about that?
I love that they talked about how every region, like they used olive oil as an example, but every region of Italy has like their own produce that they, you know, like olive oil, they've got olive oil from that region, and, you know, cheese they've got from that region, and sauces that they make from that region, and they will all argue that theirs is the best. Like you saw that with the olive oil, they were like, this is the best olive oil, and Samin was like, yeah, I agree. And I'm sure she did agree, but I'm sure down the road a couple of, you know, regions over, they'll be like, no, this is the best olive oil. So, and they're so, and I love that because it just shows that they're so passionate about what they do. So yeah, I think olive oil's a really interesting ingredient because it's not, I think in other countries we, you know, see it as like a functional ingredient, like something that's just there to stop something from burning or to like make a dressing or whatever, whereas they are like, no, it should taste good in its own right, otherwise it won't do, you know, won't bring to the table what it should be doing. Like you should be able to sip the olive oil like she does and be like, taste the flavor, rather than it be like, ugh, what's this, you know, oil.
When they were putting the olive oil in the wine glasses, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is like so Italian. It's insane, but I love it. Like that they were like, you know what, not white wine, but let's have a wine glass full of olive oil to taste.
Yeah, speaking of wine and wine glasses, and they kind of describe what I'd say in wine terms is what they call terroir. So the soil and the atmosphere and the location of where the olives are grown really inform what the final product tastes like. And you see this in wine too, what territory the grapes came from, the varietal came from, etc. So I found that really interesting. And like you were saying, it really helps them say, oh yes, ours is the best because it comes from this area with this type of soil. But that really does create a lot of different kinds of olive oil, which I think is quite interesting. And they highlight that all olive oil should be fruity, spicy, and bitter. And I'm guessing different varieties, you know, probably have more bitterness or more fruitiness.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm an olive oil expert. Like if you gave me a blind olive oil taste test, I don't know if I'd be able to really differentiate. But this is an oil that I like to cook with. I kind of use it as my default oil and have for several years now because it does add more flavor than, say, you know, vegetable oil or canola oil. It does have a nice, just extra punch of flavor. And I did really like this olive mill part of the episode. It was kind of like how it's made. I always like the behind the scenes factory look. And we got that with the cheese too.
I find it fascinating how they catch the olives, like the process, like that's why they plant the trees on hills so that you can roll like the nets down and catch them all at the end. Like I was just like, oh my God, they must have been doing that for hundreds and hundreds of years and they've not developed like a more efficient way of farming yet, but like it works. Like why change what works, you know?
And that funny little branch shaker.
Oh, yeah. Like, it was like getting your hair cut. I was like, don't come at me with that.
The focaccia looked gorgeous.
Oh, my God. I felt like Diego, when he was making that focaccia, it was like he was like, I don't know, massaging the most precious person in his life when he was doing the divots. I don't know if they slowed down that footage to make it even more dramatic, but it was like, oh my God, he's like barely pressing in like so gently and so like lovingly. I was like, oh, that's so good. Yeah, and it was like food porn, basically.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. When Samin talked about her friend who had gotten like really good olive oil for her wedding 30 years ago and just kept using it, I was thinking like, I feel like that would have been me, except because of this podcast and you guys, I have learned like, no, you can't do that. Like you just can't keep something forever and use it forever because there is an expiration date.
Well, you could have kept the Parmesan. If you'd been given a wheel of fresh Parmesan, you can keep that for 4 years. No, I think the olive oil thing, I think it's a common mistake because we don't really, not as much is known about these ingredients. Like people aren't as knowledgeable, I guess, day to day. We're not taught that stuff unless we go looking for that information. Whereas I feel like in Italy, like everyone knows about the food that they're eating because, you know, your grandmother's got an olive tree or whatever, like the woman down the road is making, you know, olive oil or whatever. Like it's just the culture's so different about food there. You would know to use olive oil rather than keep it.
And also in America, there's a lot of fake olive oil. There's actually many types of olive oil that claim to be olive oil that aren't actually.
Yeah.
It might have a little bit of olive oil and then a bunch of other oils to supplement. So be careful with the olive oil you purchase. There's actually, I think, an olive council where you can go online and check to see which brands are authentic olive oil.
Ooh.
An
Personally,
olive
I use
council.
California olive oil. That's just what it's called. It's real olive oil. It's delicious.
You're blowing my mind, Meg.
Yeah.
So the focaccia part and the following segment with the butcher, it's really hard for me not to make comparisons to the video channel that shall not be named because
I've already named it. Yeah.
But we have seen Samin make some version of this focaccia before on a certain YouTube channel. It looks delicious again, always does. I'm really tempted to make this version of focaccia. The last time I made focaccia, it didn't have the salt brine, which I find very
good.
fascinating.
Yeah. I don't know. I never thought of that. I've always thought of, you know, you put the flaky salt on the top. I'd never thought of mixing it with the oil and putting it in. I think that's such a good idea.
Yeah, I liked that this one you could make in one day. It didn't have, as we have discussed in previous episodes, like you have to wait a whole day while it sits or whatever. And then, like, he was like, you can just make this easy for breakfast in the morning.
I think it did have to rise for a few hours, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. They cut that. They cut it. They
see?
shortened the time frame.
I don't
But
understand
it's not.
these
It doesn't
things.
take. It doesn't take all day though. I
She's
think it
done.
would just take a few hours. That's all.
Not like an overnight rise.
You could do it the night before, but you wouldn't have. You don't have to. What did you think, Justine, of the pesto that La Nonna made, Lydia?
You know me, I love a good pesto. My only note is like pesto exclamation point. It's so interesting when she's like, I don't measure anything. It's done when it's done. Like, I'm not at that level yet, but maybe someday I will be with how much I make pesto. I'm kind of at that point where like I can look at it and be like, okay, more olive oil, and I'll just like wing it in that sort of sense. But like, not like Nonna. I'm not Nonna yet, but I will be.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you're her age, you're going to be there with your like little mortar being like, nobody makes it like this anymore.
Yes.
I loved it. I loved the way that she'd obviously that pestle and mortar, I guess she must have had for years, right? And her little wooden spoon, and like it was just so I don't know, like time worn. It was like second nature. Like her muscles just knew what to do because she's done it 1,000 times before, and it was just so something really relaxing about watching her do it and knowing that your pesto's in safe hands.
It seemed very meditative.
Yes.
I loved the pesto part, and it really highlighted how much of cooking is about all of your senses. What does the ingredient smell like? What sound does it make even? What's the texture? What's the consistency? How does it feel? She used all of her senses, and it's really amazing to see just what experience can do, that you don't need a recipe, that it's all about years and years of trial and error and just trusting your cooking instincts, I guess.
I really loved Lydia's old grater with the drawers, like the wooden grater that she was grating the cheese.
Oh, that was
into
cool,
the pesto
yeah.
with the
Yes.
drawers that came out. I just thought it was so, I was like, that must be like an heirloom, family heirloom, because I've never seen one like that before. Like it looked really old and well used.
Now let's talk about something that LJ loves. Pork fat.
I love the little piggies. They were so cute. How cute were they? And the way that they were talking about them as well. I just really loved how much they clearly cared about the animal, you know, like respecting it. If you're going to use it for eating, you know, you have to take care of it. And I just really loved that. And I also loved when Samin was talking about how his family came from a long line of mystic salami makers.
Yeah.
I thought that was so cool. Imagine having these men that just rolled into town and were like, you got some pork? Well, watch what we can do with it. And then you'd be like, oh my God, a sausage. Like, so cool. But yeah, I loved seeing the process of butchering that pig, because it really, and I think I said this when the channel that shall not be named did something similar, because it was really about looking at the animal almost as like a puzzle to solve to get the best out of what it has, like, you know, making that decision that he made about whether to use that big piece of fatty meat as, you know, are we going to go for one big cut of meat, or are we going to use some lardo because it's a particularly fatty animal? It would be a shame to not use that opportunity. And just like this no waste approach to the animal, because it's given its
not
life,
as
you know,
processed, not as factory decisions. It's unique to each animal.
And it just, to me, felt really respectful and what, you know, in an ideal world, what should be happening with meat if you're going to eat it, you know? And it just looked, I mean, God, I love charcuterie. And I just thought it was amazing what they did to the animal to get the best out of it. So, yeah, I loved that segment.
This is exactly why I threw it to you.
I liked when he was talking about the pigs, like when they were feeding the pigs acorns and stuff, how he talked about like there's no smell to them, like they don't smell like a quote unquote pigsty because they're eating well and they're being treated well. And I just thought, oh, hey, American farming, you should all watch this, because that's not how pigs smell typically. Like if it's pigs that are going to be eaten, like my brother's pet pig doesn't smell, but he also is
pigs are
not
clean.
He's a pet, like
he's treated well. No, pigs are clean animals by nature. They don't like being dirty. So unfortunately, I don't think it's that American farmers don't know it. I think it's that it's not economic. You know, it's a lot cheaper to do it the way that they do it, which is why they do it. They make a bigger profit, which is really sad. But sadly, that's what big food is.
Especially these days with a lot of runoff creating a lot of diseases.
I found the butcher Lorenzo to be a really fun character with his little colored circular glasses and the fake knife in his head. What a weird person.
I was going to ask, do you think the different color of the glasses are for different things, or is he just eccentric?
I think it's just him being eccentric, but I don't know. There are a lot of times where Samin's response to one of his comments was just kind of like, okay. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing.
Oh, talking of Samin and her reactions, I love when she speaks Italian. I think it's great that she like really assimilated when she lived there. I think that's awesome. But every time that someone said something to her and she went, wow, like really, really high pitched and excited, I was like, every time she says wow, like my heart soars because you're just there with her, like, wow, like, yeah.
Yeah, I really like the contrast between her Italian and then, all of her little noises of confirmation or affirmation were very English. Just like, okay,
It was really cute.
Yeah, her enthusiasm for everything is just so fun throughout the whole episode. And even like at the start, I know like we started with talking about the olive oil and stuff, but when she's like introducing kind of what the series is going to be and what she's going to be exploring, and she's talking about her background and just this little picture of her as a kid like eating food and looking so excited pops up, and it's just like you can see that childlike wonder in her today from that picture as a child at the same time. Like it's still there as she's talking with all of these people throughout Italy.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah, as she says, she's spent her entire life in pursuit of flavor, so it's really great to see that she still has this passion every single day.
And fat is flavor, as we have learned.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's time to mortar and pestle some pesto. Be right back. And we're back. Going back to the meat curing, something that happens in this episode, which I've seen all the episodes already previously, in that things are going to start reappearing. There's going to be certain callbacks in this one, but the fat plus salt and time gives you that curing process. So it's like a little peek into like what's going to happen next episode with salt. And it's sort of how we're starting to learn how these 4 elements combine and what they do for food.
That's true.
There's salt in the next segment too with the Parmesan cheese.
The cows! Oh, all the animals. I love them. They were so cute.
Those red cows were really cute.
Yeah, the baby cheese being born.
I loved that. A lot of this episode was really tactile, but I felt like this part especially, I just loved imagining the heft and the feel of that cheese. The part where she's just squishing the cheese. I loved that. I wish that I could sink my hands into a giant wheel of cheese.
Oh, yeah, they look so good. In those big copper like vats as well. I was like, I want one of those.
And then they put them into giant salt baths. I wouldn't mind having a giant salt bath.
So much cheese in that salting room, right? I'd love to know the yield that they get through every year. Because obviously once they've birthed a baby cheese, it has to sit there for months before it can actually go to market, right? To get the, I don't know, whatever taste they're going for. You know, when they did the tasting at the end, you can keep it for months and months and months.
The age.
So yeah, I'd love to know how much they produce per year, because it seemed like thousands in that room.
I was going to say, I liked also when, before it got into the aging room and they were like prepping it, and he was like, it's twins, because they cut the cheese in half, because otherwise it would be like a ginormous wheel. And then he was like, oh, they're not even. And she's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
How do you know that? Use my eyes.
Yes, exactly. I also loved how they said like milk must be respected as well, because I was like, there's just like that thread that ran through the entire episode of everyone really taking care of the ingredients that they're working with, and I just really like that. Fun story time. Once my family and I went to Tuscany for family vacation in the summer, and we drove from the UK to Tuscany, which took forever. But on the way back, we brought with us a big wheel of Parmesan, and let me tell you, that shit stunk all the way home. But we did have Parmesan for months afterwards, and it was delicious. So some might say that was worth it. I was in the back with it, so I had the raw deal, I think.
Sounds worth it to me.
Yeah, that sounds worth it. When she was doing the taste testing of like the different ages of the cheese, I will admit I was so jealous. That's like when I got the hungriest in this episode, and because as noted in the past, I love cheese. But like the way she was talking about like the different like crystals and everything as it was like aged more, and I could just like, I could taste it. Like I could
fill out with saliva, right?
Yeah, and I know like that the texture of it in your mouth too when you have a more aged cheese, and I was just like, oh my god, like I want to go and do like a cheese tasting now, and I want to. I just love that.
I lived to see Samin crying over how good cheese was. So I was like, hit me.
Such good cheese, it makes you cry. Oh my god, I want that in my life.
Speaking of Tuscany, there's that section where she goes eating at the markets there.
That looked good. And then she had La Santa del Soffritto to make soffritto for her. Which that looked delightful. I really enjoyed that, watching them chop the onion and the celery and the carrot into tiny chunks. I wish I was good at chopping soffritto. I never get it small enough.
I don't think I'd have the patience to make that soffritto that fine. They said it was like a paste by the end. It was so finely chopped.
I just don't understand how you chop that much. Like, whenever I get a huge pile of something, like when I've made soffritto in the past, I have to do it like bit by bit because my knife just doesn't seem big enough to get through a huge pile like that. But she didn't seem to have a massive knife. It seemed like a regular sized knife. So I was like, well, it's just magic. She's just really clever.
Again, we have an experienced person making something without a recipe. I'm sure this will be a theme throughout the whole show, I would guess. And again, the reliance on the senses, just what it looks like, what it feels like. we saw that in the cheese section too. Like you're just saying how he knew immediately by sight that the cheese halves were different sizes.
I thought that section where Samin made pasta was so fascinating and amazing to watch, because again, so much of it was sense based. Like they were even talking about the sound, like what sound it makes, and that's how you know that it's like thin enough. I was like, oh my god, this is just so, it's like a full body experience cooking, right? And they almost like rolled that pasta sheet like in on itself to get it thin, which I was like, oh my god, I wouldn't even like, mine would be a big old mess if I did that, for sure.
Yeah, that was a magic trick for sure. That was astounding.
And they got it so like almost see-through, like it's so amazing. I could never do that without a machine, a machine, which is what I have, the pasta roller.
Well, and then when she cut it too, it was like, she's not measuring it, she's just hand cutting it into the strips, and it was just so impressive to see. Again, that was all about like feel and like looking at it by eye, instead of, I would be there with like a measuring stick and or a ruler and like trying to
measuring
stick.
Well, from years and years and years of doing it.
Yeah.
That was something I did like about the end product, though. It did seem a bit imperfect, especially when the pasta was cooked. You could tell it was a little uneven, but I like that sort of rustic feel.
Yeah.
You could tell that a real person had made this.
Yeah. And it just looks so good with the ragu. Like everything just looks so thick and glossy and like sumptuous and unctuous and all the lovely words that a ragu should be. I was just like, oh, I'm so hungry.
That's another thing to know and learn, is that like the type of pasta you're using, chosen for the type of sauce you're using. Like if it's a heavy sauce, use this type of pasta. If it's this, use this.
Yeah. I remember them talking about that when I was in Italy, which I'd never heard before.
How does one gain this knowledge?
Well, they pass it down in Italy. Like all the nonnas are like tell their kids, and they go on and tell their kids, and they all just know. Like we've just lost that, I think, in the UK and the US in certain, that kind of knowledge is not considered. We don't get taught it at school or anything. Like people don't cook as much as they used to. It's really sad. So I think it's really lovely when you see a country where that is still more the norm than not.
I'm sure there's plenty of Italians who microwave their dinner every day.
I don't know. I'm not sure if they own microwaves. I didn't see one while I was there.
Yeah, I thought even like the different kinds of flour, like the heavy flour and the light flour, to, depending on the kind of pasta you're making, but also like when she was rolling it out, like to use the specific kind of flour for that and everything.
And the meaty surprise when Lorenzo turned up again for the final meal with his selection of
little
meats.
Piglet.
His porchetta and his
baby piglet,
his salami and his prosciutto.
The prosciutto.
Oh, it just looks so good. I was like, God, what I wouldn't give to be eating charcuterie and pasta and red wine right now. It just looked like the perfect evening.
Fresh Italian prosciutto is like so good, and when I was in Italy, we ate it every day with breakfast, but it was so light. Like, it wasn't heavy at all, and it was amazing. And then I remember trying to get prosciutto on a sandwich one time in the U.S. It was when I was in Las Vegas, and I was like, oh, no, this is not even close to, like, what I had in Italy.
Yeah. Like, when she was earlier in the show, when she was tasting just the fat from the prosciutto, she was like, oh, it's so sweet. And I was like, I could just imagine it, because it is over there. It's not like greasy and like tasteless. It's like got a flavor, and you can taste, what the animal's been eating and all that kind of stuff. It's got a real like flavor to it. And yeah,
well, I think that's one of the things I liked as the theme throughout this episode, because yes, it's fat, and we talked about fat as flavor, but it was like how to use fat well in your dishes, as opposed to being like, oh no, can't have fat, gotta be fat free, which I feel like is like this whole like theme in the US a lot of the time of like, oh, you have to avoid all fat. But it's like, if you use it properly, it's going to be okay. You just can't, like, that can't be the only thing you're doing. And I'm sure that'll, I haven't seen the rest of the, like, this is my first time watching this series. But I just enjoyed the appreciation and that there's different kinds of fat. Like, it's not just, you know, the talking about the pork fat and then, like, the cheese and the olive oil and how there's multiple different kinds of fat. It's not just, like, one thing is fat and it is bad and that is it, which I feel like is a mentality that we have here.
Yeah. And the egg yolks in the pasta even, you know. Yeah.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
In the book, it definitely goes into listing more and more types of fats per region. And like you said, it's not stuff that you would traditionally think about, like, oh, that's fat. Like, normally we're here like bacon grease, you know? Like,
Yeah.
Butter. I thought it was interesting when she made the point at the top of the episode about how, or near the top, where actually every culture has its own, like, almost foundation fat that they use. So, like, French cooking is based on butter, and Southern cooking is based off of lard, or, like, whatever. Was that what she said? Lard? I can't remember what she said. Yeah.
Yes.
And then clearly Italian cooking is based off of olive oil, and, like, that's so true. Like, everywhere you go, there is fats had to be the starting point for using things like fire and heat, because, you know, you don't want stuff to stick and burn. Fats prevents that from happening. I also thought it was interesting how she talked about the different properties or textures that fat can give. So it's like, it can be crispy, it can be light,
flaky.
It can be flaky. Yeah. And I just thought, oh yeah, I've never really thought
Creamy.
about that before, but that is what fat does.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
and it's
the gelato.
I'm excited. Yeah. Did you just randomly shout gelato, Amanda?
I did. Sorry. I heard Justine say creamy and we're fat, and I'm like, oh,
I approve.
Gelato.
I approve of that. But what this makes me excited for is to what we've kind of alluded to already, which is actually seeing how fat, as a kind of principle of cooking, it has to interact with some of these other things like heat and salt and acid, I guess, and that does different things, you know, that does different things to whatever it is that you're cooking, and how they interplay off of each other. I'm excited to kind of dig into as we go through the series.
I'm excited to see more of that too. And I'm guessing that this will also show you should really absolutely have all four elements. Like, you shouldn't have just salt, fat, and acid. She hasn't said that yet, but I'm guessing that this is what's being led up to. And in my own cooking, I've been thinking about what can I add to have all four of these elements, because I find a lot of times in recipes there's not an acid element, or there's not a heat element all the time. So definitely something to think about.
There's really nothing that, like, I didn't like about this episode.
Agreed.
I felt like it was joyful from start to finish. Like, it was just, as Meg said, like a love letter to what it is that she was talking about. A love letter to fat, a love letter to Italy, a love letter to cooking, to food. Like, just everything was just done with love and care and attention, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, I'm really excited about the rest of the series.
Me too. My first thought was that was such a breath of fresh air. It was just really pleasant, really calming to watch. I didn't really have any critiques of it either.
Would watch again.
Gelato.
Gelato. That is
Gelato.
okay. Maybe that would be my one critique. Is like she mentioned gelato as like a fat. I would have found it interesting to see some like behind the scenes gelato making in Italy. But I also know that's not like the main thing people are thinking about. Like olive oil and cheese and all of that are like more what people think about when it comes to Italian cooking. But having been there, it was just like every city you go to, there's just little gelato stands, and it's amazing.
Meg, have you been to Italy?
No, Justine, have you?
No, I haven't.
Well, when we get to, I think, the salt episode, y'all better be prepared for Japan stories.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I
yes.
will be.
Well, what a stirring conversation that was. Now we're going to see what's on our back burner today. This is where we talk about miscellaneous food stuff that's been entertaining us for the past few weeks. Okay, we've got two things on our back burner. So who found this?
Who
I
is
think it was me. Do you want me to
for this?
I could give a little summary of the 6 prawn
Yeah,
scandal?
yeah.
Okay. All right. So the 6 prawn scandal, this was a series of tweets by the London Review Bookshop at LRB Bookshop. Don't know why they were talking about food, but essentially they pulled a sort of April Fool's type story about the idea that there are only 6 prawns that are able to be photographed in the entire world. So one of these tweets said, prawns are slightly bioluminescent, which means they're impossible to photograph properly, but they're needed all the time in photographs of paella, etc. There's a single company which has invested a great deal of money in genetically engineered prawns to solve this problem. They've produced 6 of them so far. So every time you see a photo of prawns in a recipe book, they are almost certainly the same 6 prawns. And then they went on to show some food photos and said things like, if you look closely at the prawn in the upper left-hand corner, you'll notice that it's the same prawn in this photograph.
Yeah, they went through loads of cookery books and tried to make the argument that some of the prawns were in all of them. I mean, I
Did you believe it?
No.
No.
Okay, I did, because you...
I was like, for one, how the hell would that work? Like, there's just 6 prawns that get, like, buried around the world to be photographed. Like, they'd be falling apart. They're not indestructible. Also, they wouldn't last. Like, they would start going off. Like, how is that going to work?
That's what I loved about this, though, is that people were fooled. I'm so happy that you were, Amanda, because I think that it's just so unexpected, right? Why is this bookstore talking about food photography, right? So there's this idea of like, maybe it's true because why else would they be tweeting about it? And it's far from...
In September.
Right. And that's the other thing. It's far from April. So that kind of, puts you on the back foot, because you're just like, wait, this can't possibly be an April Fool's joke because it's September.
And I also I looked at it when I was like on my lunch break at work, and I only get like 30 minutes. And so I was like trying to catch up and read everything and just be like, okay, so I'm prepared for Sunday because we'll talk about this. And I'm like, I was seriously like sitting there being like, how? So is it like they've genetically modified 6 different kinds of prawns and those are the only ones that people buy when they have to cook them and have them photographed, or are they not real and they transport them? And I was, oh my God, I feel so stupid now.
The other reason I knew this wasn't real straight away is because I've definitely cooked prawns and photographed them before. Like, I Instagram my dinner a lot, and I was just like, no, I never had this issue. This is bullshit. I thought my favourite reply to it was someone going, because obviously it was a UK bookshop that decided to tweet this story, and someone went, well, what happens with non-UK produced cookbooks? Do we loan out our prawns when we need to? And they replied saying, the bookshop replied saying, I'm not sure, but I was chatting with a publisher's rep the other day, and she told me that all the prawns in the Snoop Dogg cookbook were Photoshop. I think there's a lot that can be done in post-production these days. And I was like,
Oh
Jesus
my
Christ.
God. Okay, I didn't read that far into the thread.
My favorite picture is like, look what happens when you're not using stunt prawns. All the prawns in this picture are invisible.
It's like, it's a meat paella. There's no prawns in it.
I also loved that at least one photograph had more than 6 prawns in that single photograph.
Yes.
So...
Exactly. No, they were just photoshopping the same prawn over and over, Meg.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel so stupid, guys.
Well, it wasn't April Fool's, so I guess, you'd be like, why would they be lying about prawns?
Well, yeah, it's September. Again, why? I never would have guessed. Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm really glad I didn't try to tell Jeremy about this cool thing I learned through the podcast.
Maybe you should tell him and see how long it takes him to realize that it's not real.
No, it'll backfire, and he'll just be like, who have I married? Why do you believe these things?
Well, the second thing on our back burner today, somewhat related, somewhat not, is shark coochie boards.
This was amazing. I I don't even, so I I have to say, I didn't get it at first because I read it and didn't hear it out. I didn't hear what it was meant to be saying, but basically it was a tweet. Someone had tweeted, I want to be one of those basic girls that's really good at making charcuterie boards or whatever, these. And it was a picture of a charcuterie board, but I didn't get it because I looked at the charcuterie board like briefly, the picture, and there was just a lot of fruit on it and I didn't quite see the meat, so I didn't twig that it was meant to be a charcuterie board. So my husband had to explain it to me, but she thought that it was spelled charcuterie boards. I mean,
earlier in the episode when you said charcuterie, I just laughed because this was all I could think of.
Yep, same.
You mean charcuterie board?
I feel like from now on, whenever LJ says charcuterie, I'm going to envision
charcuteries. I don't even know what a charcuterie looks like. Can someone get a picture? Actually, no, don't Google that.
No.
Yeah, I was
I
gonna
don't
say,
want
be
to see
careful
it.
going through that Twitter thread because, yikes. There are some Photoshops that
really?
are NSFW. Yes.
Oh,
I want to go. I want to look.
Oh, no.
Oh.
No.
Yeah. That's some vulva.
That's some Photoshop right there. Yeah, that's not safe for work Twitter thread to look up for sure.
I believe it's called a malapropism.
Yeah.
We've seen this before in our past on our very own podcast because I got a piece of merchandise with bone, apple, and tea on it.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's everything for today's Back Burner. If you see some fun stuff on the internet, please send it our way.
Yes.
And maybe we'll talk about it here.
Please.
Yeah.
See if you can fool me again.
See if you can top charcuteries, because I don't know if anyone can.
All right, guys, we have some shout outs. We want to, first of all, thank everybody in the BA Twitter fandom for retweeting our last episode and leaving us comments. They have been the most supportive. Shout outs to @ContextClaire, @ChunkyHunzi, @Bad Post C Saffitz, @Bon Appetit Bot, @MollyBaz with 2 Z's, and @Sohla Spoon.
Thank you.
Thank you to our podcast friends, Varmints, Heidi from Vibrant Visionaries, and Bedknobs and Broomflicks. And thank you to Jaslyn, Kathy, T. Ambrose, Margaret, Mary, Diosaria, Reform Bandits, and Ellen Whitehouse. Oh my gosh, all these people left us comments.
Yeah, everyone's been really sweet and kind and supportive of this next phase of our podcast, and I think it's really warmed our hearts. I think because I think we were afraid that everyone would be like, oh well, let's all go home.
Yeah, it really means a lot to us that you've been so supportive and that you want to keep listening to us. It makes us really happy.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, we have no new review to share this week. I want to leave a reminder that if you do want to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, you can now find us titled Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes. Thank you for joining us this week. Next time on the podcast, we'll cover salt, episode 2 of Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. Thanks for listening to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
We'd love to hear from you, so find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest at pod_appetit.
And on Facebook at Pod Appétit Podcast.
You can also email us at podappetitpodcast@gmail.com and find all of our episodes on our website, podappetitpodcast.com.
Hi, I'm Liz.
And I'm Josh.
And together we are Bloody Date Night.
Bloody Date Night asks the question, can a horror expert show his horror novice
Who you calling a horror novice?
horror movies that he loves and she's seeing for the first time?
It's about what happens when you introduce the person you love to the thing you love, and they're probably gonna hate it.
Just like me with taxes.
We're Bloody Date Night. Give us a listen.
Get your headphones on and bebop time.